Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Ukraine Media Center. And today we have Prosecutor General of Ukraine, Iryna Venedіktова, with us, and we are to discuss war crimes of the Russian Federation committed in Ukraine. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon, friends. It's very good to have this chance to discuss things today, especially that we have something to sum up. On Friday, we signed for joint investigation team with Poland and Lithuania. So indeed, we can discuss what the Prosecutor General is doing now in various areas. No doubt, the first and foremost thing for us is to document and investigate war crimes committed in Ukraine. On the website of the Prosecutor General Office, we inform, and every day, every morning, we update information about the number of investigations we have been running. For war crimes alone, currently we have 3,085 cases. And you know, using the Ukrainian jurisdiction, using Ukrainian courts is a priority for me because I want to have sentences on behalf of Ukraine to be issued for war criminals. But we understand all too well that it's not that always that simple about war. So we have also been working on international platforms. 2 weeks ago, we had Karim Khan, the prosecutor of the International Criminal Court. He started his investigation. That's very important, and it's of particular importance to me because a lot of things, a lot of work has been done for it to happen. Ukraine has not a signatory to the Rome Statute. So we'll make every effort possible on the one hand to have it signed and ratified in Ukraine, and on the other hand, we'll make every effort for the prosecutor in International Criminal Court to be successful and for him to have successful cases about crimes committed in Ukraine. Another very important area of activities is initiating proceedings in other countries. There are 9 more countries in addition to Ukraine who initiated their own criminal cases about war crimes. And no doubt, work done by our task force is important. Since the very first days of the war, we have created this interagency team where we have people from law enforcement agencies, from Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Ministry of Justice, and Corruption Prevention Agency. For war criminals, we look for their assets. We seize them, arrest them in order to confiscate them later. And it's not about sanctions, it's about criminal cases, criminal proceedings, in order to have those assets, that property confiscated by the state. And also, concurrently, we'll be running civil confiscation, civil cases towards confiscation for victims. We issue the status of victims, and on the border, on each border checkpoint, we have prosecutors. Prosecutors only work on war crimes. We interview people, and within the last week, we have seen a lot of people from Mariupol who have managed to move, and we issue a status of a victim in the criminal case for them to have all those rights within the criminal proceedings and for them to be entitled to compensation as a victim of war. So these are our main areas of activities. Of course, their daily activities by prosecutors. We work 24/7. In the morning, I had a big meeting for coordination with prosecutors from provinces and with other law enforcement agencies, and you know that we cannot do anything without military. So we also met with the military police service, and we do make every effort to have all activities of our law enforcement agencies in Ukraine coordinated to get a result, to get not also victory on front lines, but also to win in diplomatic front, in the legal front, because, you know, our joint task is to stop the enemy, and those actions also result in this aggression stopping. You're welcome with your questions. I wanted to first briefly tell you where we are at the moment, but I understand that most importantly we have questions from journalists. I'm ready to answer. You're welcome. Please speak into the microphone.
Kemp from AFP. A couple of questions in English, if I may. On the ICC, if I understood you correctly, did you say that Ukraine is interested in signing up to the Rome Statute and joining the ICC? And do you think there's a realistic prospect of, for example, Vladimir Putin appearing at the ICC? Secondly, if I may, will you also be investigating any Ukrainian war crimes if they come up? For example, we saw a recent video circulating of some Russian soldiers being shot in the leg, allegedly by Ukrainian forces. If there are any war crimes by Ukraine, will you investigate those as well? Thank you.
Дякую дуже за запитання.
Thank you very much for your question. About your first question, it actually had two questions. First of all, about ratification of the Rome Statute. I am for ratification. I support ratification of the Rome Statute because the jurisdiction, the competence of the International Criminal Court has already covered Ukraine. We submitted to that jurisdiction ad hoc, so the ICC prosecutor has all possibilities in Ukraine. And now it's very important for us to have our possibilities in the International Criminal Court. A simple example, to participate in appointing the judges. There are also other opportunities when you are a participant, when you are a member state. So, of course, I, as a lawyer, understand that now we do need those opportunities. Why this ratification has not taken place? As far as I understand, there is still no political consensus within the parliament, within the Verkhovna Rada. Because you remember that this issue of ratification was first raised long ago, and now there has been an agreement whereby everything where there is no doubt should be submitted to the parliament hearing. I do hope that we'll have to speak with all politicians and to get our message to them, how important it is to ratify the Rome Statute. I am a prosecutor, I am not a politician, but I have always acted for this ratification. I stand for that ratification as needed. That's your first question. Second, whether we see President Putin brought to ICC as an accused. We know that currently, by now, the ICC prosecutor is completely independent. How he will develop his strategy of investigation, how he sees it, whom he will approach, that's his exclusive competence. My task is to do my job here, so that, all I can, if there is anything I can help the ICC prosecutor in documenting the crimes, in interrogations, whatever, I will do it. How I see it, Ukraine is a state which does respect the rule of law. Whoever would say anything about reforms and rule of law, now you can see that we do respect the rule of law. And indeed, for us, it's not just some empty words. We work within the framework of those conventions of the international law implemented in our national legislation. And we have people who have their functional immunity. I said more than once that the biggest war criminal of the 21st century is Vladimir Putin. But whether we have launched a criminal investigation, criminal proceedings against him, he has a functional immunity. And in compliance with norms of the international law and national law which implement them, we cannot initiate this particular criminal proceedings as long as he is the president of the Russian Federation. So, of course, there is this chain where we are to move and whom we are to see as an accused in the International Criminal Court. We'll see. Here, in this case, I'd like to say that we have a big anchor case, which is about the military aggression of the Russian Federation. I call it the case of the 24th of February in my meetings, and we have more than 200 suspects in this case, high-level military criminals, ministers, members of the Security Council of Russia, senators, and others who were directly involved. And on that list, we also have those propaganda agents. They contributed with their efforts to developing this war and those hostilities. We will see whom that prosecutor will approach, but we have made everything possible on our side. we already marked them as suspects. We already approached Ukrainian courts, and we already got decisions by Ukrainian courts about arrest as an injunction, about bringing them into custody as an injunction measure, because there is a very serious article of the criminal code under which they are suspects. And of course, we have been searching for them, and that's a question for the international community. I said, that's why I said at the very beginning that it's very important for us to see that other jurisdictions also initiate those criminal proceedings, because for me it's very important to understand how prosecutors in other countries understand and treat those crimes. Within the first days of this war, I spoke with a large number of prosecutors generals from other countries. We spoke with the International Association of Prosecutors. I wrote an official letter to them, can we have prosecutors from the Russian Federation in that International Prosecutors Association? Is it the goal of the prosecutors in all countries worldwide? No, the prosecutors work to bring light, to bring law and order, to bring the rule of law. So for me, it's very important that prosecutors, public prosecutors, should not help their dictator, their kings, so to say, but those prosecutors should defend the interests of their people and their statehood, and that's how we have been working. Your second big question was about violations towards prisoners of war. Well, this is the right question. Unfortunately, this is not the first war going on on the global scale. That's why the international humanitarian law is there. We respect it. We work within the framework of Geneva Conventions, and we definitely understand that the Russian Federation will be acting very actively, using various international institutions to push a completely different agenda. So we have been working in accordance with those standards, with those rules. If there are any offenses, any violations on our side, of course, definitely we will investigate them and we'll move in that direction. Thank you. Thank you. Please speak into the microphone.
Can you tell us a bit more about the categories of war crime? You mentioned 3,085 cases.
That's true.
What kind of war crimes, and so on? And then, do you have already any suspects? And if so, would these suspects among, Russian prisoners of war? And if so, would you recommend to the government to exclude these suspects from exchange of prisoners, for example? Or, I guess it's very early to talk about that, but if you have any information on suspects also.
Я почну з другого питання.
I'll start with your second question. We do have such suspects, and for me to be successful as a prosecutor, I'll keep silence. Indeed, this is confidential information, and I hope that you will have something to do in the Ukrainian court. You will see how we will be working under this article on war crimes. We have one article, Article 438 in our criminal code, and we'll move in that direction and we'll see what will happen. We have been working in that direction. We do have such suspects. Now about which war crimes are there. Currently, in the criminal code of Ukraine, there's only one article about war crimes. Of course, for this reason, we use more the international humanitarian law and classify them like they're classified, categorized internationally. And there's a lot of those. On the one hand, I look at those cases, those proceedings in Ukraine, and unfortunately, 3,000 that we have is not the end. This number will increase because the aggression has not stopped. I see what can be done in the International Criminal Court, and I run those parallels. Say, if you say that war crimes are just about conscious killing of civilians, we see it. If you say that war crimes are when civil infrastructure is being destroyed, including orphanages, hospitals, recently there was a maternity ward in Mariupol. We'll get back to this case yet. So this is about the conscious destruction of civil infrastructure. If you see that civilians are killed, are shot, that's a war crime. Even if we see that the armed forces of the enemy use our uniforms, Ukrainian uniforms, this is a war crime. So what I'm getting at, don't, when you hear about those 3,000 cases, some of them are big cases which have many episodes within one case. There are cases about just one fact, a simple fact, but what I see now, what sort of prospects I see. Unfortunately, well, we are talking about war crimes. This is a very serious, that's very cynical sometimes, but again, it's very harsh to discuss in the 21st century. It's very harsh from all sides, from all perspectives. But now I look further than that. I look at crimes against humanity. ICC, the International Criminal Court, again can consider those, investigate those. When we see some systematic nature in those war crimes, the same war crimes are done are carried out systematically. When there is systematic bombing of kindergartens, of hospitals, this is about a systematic nature, and here we could consider it as crime against humanity. I will be very cautious in what I'm saying now, and please understand me. What has been happening in Mariupol at the moment is not war crimes anymore. It's not a war crime, because the war crime is about some rules. War has its rules, and this is beyond all rules, beyond every rule. And I look at it from this perspective, how to classify it as genocide, when the whole city has been taken hostages. The whole city has been taken hostages. People are there without water, without food, without heating supply. It's impossible to leave it. And there are those convoys who try to leave the city and they are shooted. When there is destruction, and it has been mentioned by the minister, Lavrov, minister of that aggressor state, they said that, yes, they knew that they have been bombing the maternity ward, where women are located who have to bring birth to their children and to their babies, and their babies next to them. So you see, this is a location from which, the city from which adults and children have been deported. We have two big cases. One big case is about deportation from Ukraine, and a separate case about children. More than 2,000 children have been deported from Mariupol alone. So what's that? Is it just a war crime? No, it's much bigger than a war crime. So I am very cautious about possibility of classifying it as a genocide. As a prosecutor general, I am very cautious about it. But as a citizen, I think that, yes, I understand very well what's happening to our people. So again, maybe that's too emotional, but we have journalists, foreign journalists from foreign media here. It's very important, dear friends, for you to understand. It's not about Donbass. It's not about Crimea. Putin wants just to destroy Ukraine as a nation, as a state. Indeed, it's about destroying the Ukrainian people, as a nation. That's why there have been those deportations, evacuations, and all that. So you should not be tricked by, fooled around by these things. It's not just by chance that, I'm sure you all heard his historical lecture before the war, how it happens in Lenin's times, in Stalin's times. It was already done with the Ukraine. There were deportations of peoples. There were killings through famine, that Holodomor. It was already happening. So we had this experience in the last century, and now we have had this experience of 8 years of war. What happened to occupied Donetsk and Luhansk and Crimea? What's happening to Crimean Tatars within the last 8 years? So there have been a lot of questions, and we have to answer those. You're welcome. Дякую.
I'd like to follow up the question of my colleague Remy. I'm Lorenzo Cremonesi for the Italian daily Corriere della Sera from Milano.
Oh, sorry, I don't know Italiano.
Sorry, I said my name is Lorenzo Cremonesi and I write for the Italian daily Corriere della Sera from Milano. It's noisy, yes. Madam, we ask for specific case because that build up our articles. Apart generic accusation of violation of human rights and war crimes, again, specific question. I have 2 or 3 specific questions. We, being on the ground, we meet refugees, we speak with the soldiers, and we hear a lot of horrible stories, of course. For instance, a few days ago, the mayor of Brovary, near Kiev, told me that he knew personally some cases of sexual abuse by Russian soldiers against Ukrainian women in villages which had been occupied by Russian troops. And he gave me some names. Do you find this sexual abuse story a war crime? Do you have specific cases? Do you know about that? Do you think this is a spread phenomenon or just limited? What do you know about this question of sexual abuse by Russian soldiers against civilians here in the areas? Another question. You mentioned Mariupol, which is, of course, such an immense tragedy. Do you intend to accuse the Russian of practicing ethnic cleansing in this area? I mean, moving population from Mariupol to Russia. Do you intend to use this argument of ethnic cleansing? Thank you very much.
Дякую дуже.
Thank you very much. About sexual offenses, we had such information since the very first days. We had current information. Rape is a private accusation. We have to have a complaint from the victim. We understand it all too well. The operative information that we have been receiving from all parts of Ukraine occupied by invaders, that was just some detective operative information. I, as a prosecutor, and other prosecutors who will approach courts with such accusations, even with those brutal crimes like rapes, we have to have some evidence. We have to have an evidence base. So we have been working on that. The cases have been documented, have been registered. There have already been first cases where we have some suspects. You know, we just cannot announce somebody a suspect. We have to understand who that person was. That suspicion is issued not just to some abstract soldier from the aggressor country, but to against a specific person with their first name, surname, and patronymic. Also, we have to carry out some procedural investigative actions. And to do that, we have to have access to the victim and to have access to other channels to gather the evidence. Because we understand that whatever we can do, if we break the law even to the smallest extent, it will hit us back. Aggressor country will hit us back with those violations. So we have not just initiated that case, we already have a particular suspect there in that case. What was your second question about Mariupol ethnic cleansing?
Да.
So, about ethnic cleansing. To discuss particular classification, we have to get to it. We have to classify that case somehow. You know, just for citizens, it sounds like something emotional, but for prosecutors and judges, it sounds like some classification of crime which has certain components. So as soon as we will be able to get to that stage, I'd like to relate to the answer I provided. I considered possible classification as a genocide. What will that genocide include and in which parts, which components? As soon as I have any arguments, I will gladly share those with you. Any clarifications? Microphone.
I understand that you cannot give us the names, it's private and maybe it's still too early, but at least can you give us an idea of the numbers of this sexual abuse case? How many cases you know, more or less? Give us an idea, a proportion. 10, 100, 500?
Там, де ми маємо підозру,
Wherever we have a suspect, unfortunately this is only one case where we have a suspect, because we cannot get to that occupied area, we cannot get to those victims, we cannot reach those victims. There have been a lot of cases initiated, but it will tell you nothing, because they are launched, they're registered as a case based on a fact. But when we have a victim and when we already have a specific suspect, then we have only one case of that sort, because we cannot get to that territory, we cannot reach it. Thank you. You have to understand our situation. Now we are talking about war crimes, and in most cases, prosecutors are civil agencies, like in your civil office, like in your countries. Now we have been trying, and I'll use this opportunity to mention it. I hope the parliament will support it. We have to bring the military prosecutors back, because we are not allowed to the front lines. We have to quickly gather the evidence, but you see that civil prosecutors are not allowed to those areas. We try to do it, and we approach the parliament. We have prosecutors, some boys who are ready to risk their lives to go there and quickly gather that evidence. Please bring back that military prosecutor office, because it was eliminated under law. So now we have been working in a situation that we have. You're welcome.
La radio française Europe 1.
Мікрофон трошки ближче.
Please speak into the microphone. Bring microphone closer. Please bring the microphone closer.
Les attaques de civils que vous dénoncez, y a-t-il aujourd'hui des...
Sorry, the interpreter does not speak. Sorry, the interpreter does not speak French or understand French. Sorry.
Y a-t-il un moyen de faire remonter ces responsabilités?
sorry, nobody understands French.
He will translate. Okay.
Дякую.
Yes, sorry. Y a-t-il un moyen aujourd'hui de faire remonter ces responsabilités au commandant en chef russe, à savoir Vladimir Poutine?
Ви казали про системне бомбардування.
You mentioned systemic bombing of civilian infrastructure and residential quarters. Is there any method, any way to find the evidence to get to the top leadership of Russia? Yes, there is a way, and we are doing it, to get to generals and to Putin. Well, we already have the first suspect who was bombing city of Kharkiv. And due to him, we have identified another suspect, a Russian general, who issued orders to bomb Kharkiv, city of Kharkiv. The most interesting, more cynical thing in this story is that that general was born in Kharkiv province. Some human side to it. So, of course, it's very difficult, but we have been using every opportunity to reach from bottom to the top layers. Thank you. Thank you. I'm Zbigniew Parafianovich from Dziennik Gazeta Prawna from Poland. My question is about those deported residents of Mariupol. In your view, where are they at the moment, and what will happen to them? You mean people, Ukrainian people? Yeah. I think I cannot provide information. I cannot share more details than I can. You better ask directly those people whose competence includes these matters, because when I'm very cautious, very careful when speaking with journalists, because the information that I share, then if you need it, it should not be used against our legal position. So where they are located, you better ask that question to those people in our government who are in charge of that. That's Ms. Iryna Vereshchuk. Thank you. Any more questions, dear friends? Last question. Last question. Sorry. I just have a very important. I will have a very important call about my direct responsibilities. Yeah.
We saw in Kiev many civilians buildings get attacked. Did you record any usage of cluster bombs or any other forbidden weapons here in Kiev?
А що стосується Києва,
About Kiev, I would not talk about it unless and until we get specific evidence. But about other regions, we do have such evidence. We do have such evidence in Odessa province. We do have such evidence in Kherson province, where they directly used cassette bombs and projectiles. And of course, we see, by the way, also due to journalists, due to the media, we see information about use of other prohibited weapons. But again, when I have specific evidence base, when I have, for example, after something is used, if I have fragments, if I have some examination of the soil, if I clearly understand that I will get to the court of law with those evidence, then I can speak with journalists. Currently, I can tell you about cassette projectiles. It's about Kherson and Odessa provinces. About Kyiv, we have been working. Thank you very much, Iryna. Thank you very much. Good day. Thank you for joining us here. I'd like to remind you that at 3 p.m. We'll have a spokesperson of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine.